Hey there, and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight,
I feel like we're all resilient in a way. We all have some form of resilience.
participants in the city's Guaranteed Income Pilot sing the praises of how they say the program has helped stabilize their lives. Another chapter in the history of Emmett Till has closed as the woman who made that fatal accusation years ago has died. Business owner Gia Davis gives the last word on why she says it makes business sense to consider hiring residents returning from incarceration. The city of Chicago has its first ever poet laureate. We hear from Avery Young on Poetry Beyond the Page. And a look back at legendary musician Harry Belafonte's role in the civil rights movement. All that coming up. But our first story tonight, a chapter closes in the brutal killing of teenager Emmett Till, right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
The white woman who accused Black Chicago teenager Emmett Till of making inappropriate advances leading to his lynching in 1955 Mississippi has died at the age of 88. Carolyn Bryant Donham's accusation was the spark that caused her husband Roy Bryant and accomplice J.W. Milam to kidnap and kill young Till. An all-white jury acquitted the two men, though they later confessed to the murder in a magazine interview. As recently as last year, there were questions as to whether Bryant Donham herself would face prosecution for the accusation that some argue she later recanted. Joining us now is Till family attorney Chris Benson, who also co-authored two books, one with Emmett's mother, Mamie Till Mobley, and another with Reverend Wheeler Parker, Till's cousin and the last living witness to his killing. Chris, welcome back. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, Brandis. Thank you.
So Reverend Wheeler Parker, Till's cousin and last living witness, as we said, released a statement after Bryant Donham's death was reported. It reads in part, quote, "Our hearts go out to the family of Carolyn Bryant Donham. As a person of faith for more than 60 years, I recognize that any loss of life is tragic and don't have any ill will or animosity toward her. Even though no one now will be held accountable for the death of my cousin and best friend, it is up to all of us to be accountable to the challenges we still face in overcoming racial injustice." Chris, Emmett Till's story has been part of your life's work. What was your reaction when you learned of her death?
Well, we expected this to happen sooner than later. We knew that she was in ill health, and it was just a matter of time. We were hopeful that at some point before she left that she would confess, that she would tell the truth about what happened. Sadly, that never happened. On the good side, though, Reverend Parker and I participated in a 4-year ride-along with the FBI and the Department of Justice and the District Attorney in the Northern District of Mississippi to close out the investigation. And over those 4 years, we were able to see a lot of documentation that still hasn't been released to the public. But we were able to connect up the dots to show her responsibility in this horrible lynching of Emmett Till, and to see how her story had grown in order to cover up her involvement in that grisly affair.
And considering all of that research and investigation and all that you and the family know about what happened, does this do anything to close a chapter for the Till family?
Well, as you read the statement by Reverend Parker, this is a deeply religious family. And as he and of course, as Emmett's mom, the late Mamie Till Mobley, would say so often, hate destroys the hater. So they didn't want to hold on to that. But at the same time, they wanted to see some accountability in this case. Now the accountability will come in the way we continue to tell the story. Carolyn Bryant Donham didn't tell it. We have all the facts now. We have the context for those facts, what it all means, and we're going to continue to tell the story. So there's at least some measure of justice in that, in reaching the truth. And as a journalist, we're all about the truth. So we'll continue to tell the story.
Last year, there were attempts to see her arrested and charged. Just last week, a Mississippi sheriff said that the newly discovered arrest warrant was now moot. How much blame do you assign to her? And it sounds like, obviously, from the research that and the investigation that you've been a part of, quite some, right? Quite a bit. Because didn't she have reason to believe that her husband would react the way he did when she identified him in the middle of the night?
Yeah, and we see that in the documents that we were able to review, including the manuscript that she wanted to publish as a book, in which she says that she felt like she was as much a victim as Emmett Till. So, but we were able to thread a lot of these elements together to see that she knew what her husband was capable of. So there is some amount of culpability in that, and under Mississippi law, that could have been a charge of manslaughter. Regrettably, though, that didn't happen. And I think the thing that we need to move forward and understand is that while we may want to look at these perpetrators in telling this story, we also have to look at the power structure that made all this possible. First, that white people in 1955 believed that they could get away with murdering a black person. And two, everything that was done by that power structure to cover this whole thing up. A lot of the stories that have carried forward from that moment are stories that they distorted in ways that I think take us away from this realization of not only the facts, but the meaning of those facts. That's something that we're correcting now through the book that I co-authored with Reverend Parker.
Are there unresolved questions that this death will leave unresolved? And also, what more might we learn? You say that there are, there's a lot of documents that still have not been released.
Well, we saw them. We were able to spend a lot of time analyzing the documents, and we write about that in the book and draw conclusions from that. So with respect to the facts of the case, with respect to the meaning of those facts, there's nothing new that will emerge again after the work that we've done. What we'd like to continue looking at is this power structure that is on a parallel, we believe, with 1955 and the present moment. And that's what we want people to understand from the Emmett Till story. Emmett Till is a story of a horrible crime that was committed against this gifted kid, but it's more than that. It's the story about how people in the South were concerned and afraid of what was happening at that moment. They were looking at what had just happened with Brown versus Board of Education and the transformation of racial relations in this country. Right now, we're on a parallel with what was going on back then as people look forward to what is about to happen, and that is a transformation of this country with respect to the demographics. And people are afraid of losing power, and that's what we're seeing now, this pushback, this violent pushback against that change, just as we saw in 1955. Emmett Till, the story of Emmett Till, helps us to understand the challenges we're dealing with right now, and that's what we want to move forward to tell.
And Chris, we've got about 30 seconds. Where does the Till family go from here in maintaining this story and this legacy?
We have formed the Emmett Till and Mamie Till Mobley Institute that continues to advance the legacy of Mamie Till Mobley, which is all about education. So telling the story, telling the contextual story in every way possible, helping people, young people especially, to get involved, to see that they have a civic duty to be engaged in this democratic process. We've developed a national curriculum with Facing History and Ourselves to teach high school students not only the facts of the Emmett Till case, but also what it means for them in moving forward as engaged citizens in this democratic society. So that's what we're going to continue doing. We're looking forward, not back.
Definitely more to come. I'm sure we'll be talking about it as it all develops. Chris Benson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, we check in with a couple of Chicagoans who are participating in the city's Guaranteed Income Pilot. Last summer, the 8,000 Chicagoans selected to participate in the city's guaranteed income pilot began receiving $500 a month to spend however they needed. The pilot, called Resilient Communities, was designed to help income-qualified Chicagoans stabilize their financial circumstances. Producer Erica Gunderson met two of those participants to find out how the program has worked for them so far.
As around the sun, the earth knows she's revolving.
Deontay Baker has been a singer his whole life. So as a young adult, he decided to give a professional music career a shot. By spring 2022, Baker says he was on a roll.
Time is tricky in music, and you have to sometimes go after opportunities when they present themselves. I had like a job interview, and then the next day I had a job interview. The next day I had a gig. Like I was on the roll. I had a plan.
But that progress came to a sudden halt when he was violently attacked outside of his apartment in Austin.
I was stabbed with a 10-inch carving knife and bled out. I bled out and lost like a third of my blood. Had to have 3 blood transfusions. Had to learn how to walk again. You know, me being a singer, I had to give up everything because I physically could not do it. And just as far as how you feel about yourself, because if you can't work for yourself, then, you know, you're like, well, what's my life? What am I doing?
Baker was still recovering from the attack when he heard about the city's Resilient Communities Guaranteed Basic Income Pilot and decided to apply. He says he was overjoyed to learn he was selected.
It literally got me out of the gutter. Financially, I was able to get a car for myself. I was able to pay rent. I was able to rebuild my life and feel good about it.
Augustina Townsend had rebuilding on her mind, too, when she moved to Chicago from Nigeria in 2002. A few years later, she was working as a cashier and learned she was pregnant. She recalls bringing her newborn son, Miles, home.
Put him on the bed and I looked at him and said, boy, your ma is just a cashier at Target, but we're going to take one day at a time. And that one day has brought us to 16 years, and we're still counting.
For those 16 years, Townsend has raised him alone. And while she says it's been a financial struggle, making sure Miles has what he needs is her constant focus.
Miles plays basketball. Miles has a dream. Miles is a leader.
Townsend works as a rideshare driver, and she says the pandemic shutdowns made her already fragile financial situation worse.
Pandemic, I was piling up on my credit card bills because that was basically the only means of survival. By the time you incorporate gas, time, me being a single mother, I barely make nothing.
Townsend says the monthly $500 she's received through Resilient Communities has helped keep her on the road by covering car expenses. With some careful budgeting, she was even able to travel with Miles to a school basketball tournament downstate.
I'm only going to end up spending 2 nights as instead of 3 nights because of the expenses. Miles is going to eat. I'm going to eat. I'm going to pay gas. We're going to travel.
Both Baker and Townsend say as they approach the end of the pilot, they have renewed hope for their financial futures.
I have hope. Huge hope, as bigger than me. We have dreams, big dreams.
It gave me, honestly, the confidence to go after my dreams and invest in my dreams. I'm making those short-term goals, which is going to connect me to the long-term goals, which is ultimately going to help me get the life that I want for myself, that I envision for myself.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And the pilot period of Resilient Communities ends this summer. In a city known for its poets and poetry, being named Chicago's first ever poet laureate is high praise and a tall order. But teacher, producer, composer, performer, and yes, poet Avery Brooks says he can't wait to get started serving as the city's poetry ambassador. And joining us to talk about his vision for the role is Avery Young. Thank you for joining us and congratulations.
No, thank you so much, and I'm so glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. Now, you're a homegrown talent. Where did your love of poetry begin?
Love of poetry just began having a book called I Am the Darker Brothers, which is a compilation of black poets, and I was just fell in love with words and the stories that were being told in those books by so many great poets, you know.
While you were growing up, how was that sort of love of words nurtured and encouraged and practiced?
Just everything, through music, through church, watching a minister kind of preach and get people all riled up and in praise and things of that nature, and I was like, wait, hold up. That's some magic. I was like, okay, I'm going to figure that out.
It's the magic you've got, apparently.
I'm going to figure this out, yes.
You're the first person to hold this title. What does that mean to you?
Wow. I'm like, wow, because I'm thinking of so many poets. Gwendolyn Brooks, and I'm thinking of Carolyn Rogers, and Kent Foreman, and Brenda Matthews. There's so many poets that this could have been. But it's me, and I'm thinking like, wow. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm doing this like every half hour just to make sure that it's actually real. But I'm excited. I'm excited.
Your poetry goes beyond the page as a cross-disciplinary artist. Here's a look at your performance of a work about Emmett Till.
Yes. Were you there? Were you there? See, gotcha. See him all dressed in black. Oh, were you there? See, Sister Spanked. Were you there? Were you there? Hear brothers cry.
So what is it about this approach to poetry that works for you?
First time I've seen any message being given to people through language has been through a sermon and the black preaching. And so a lot of what is going on through church and transforming the space with language is what influences the way in which I deliver poems and things of that. And so this particular poem, Emmett Till, the remix, is basically a kind of a retelling of a hymn that I learned in church. It was like, were you there when they crucified my Lord? And I remember just going to this school, and the young men had no idea who Emmett Till was. And then I was like, I'm going to write a poem so they'll never forget him. And then I was like, well, how am I going to recite the poem? And I thought about, again, a sermon and how effective that could be when it kind of initiates an emotional engagement, not just, oh, I'm listening to a story about something that happened in history. I want to tie this murder of this child with this emotion, and then I'll never forget this story just because the way it was even delivered, I won't forget it.
What are some of the topics, issues that that you enjoy or appreciate writing about, or what's sort of a message that that you're often going for when you're working?
I'm usually in the black world that I grew up in on North Avenue on Central, the liquor store, the currency exchange, and the storefront church, all kind of like next door to each other. Things that make me laugh and smile. I was just telling someone earlier today, if you want to keep anything private, don't ever tell a poet.
Or a reporter.
Or a reporter, right. It's inspiration. It was like I'm always kind of like the sponge, and so it varies. I like to talk about the stories of people attached to this great city. So I write poems about Mavis Staples. I write poems about Pop Staples. I write poems about my mother, my cousins, my uncles. You know.
Everything Chicago.
A lot of things Chicago. A lot of things Chicago.
So, with that in mind, what do you envision for this role, and how do you hope it'll impact, other poets, but also future poet laureates?
Wow. I would like for the future poet laureates to feel like they can come somewhere, get some work done, and share with the city. I think this particular time, with me being the first one, we can figure some things out and find more support for programming and things of that nature. So that's what I hope for.
Are you surprised Chicago hasn't already had a poet laureate? Considering the history, the state has, but Chicago is not.
I'm thoroughly surprised. I didn't think about it like that because I've been around poetry in this community for a long time, and I was like, right, never heard about anybody who's the laureate.
First time for everything, and it's going to be
you. It's me, but I thought.
Are there resources that the role offers that could give you access to new or different stories?
We're hoping that's what I want to work with. I want to work with the D-Case department and figure out the resources to create residencies for poets outside of myself. Maybe there is a meeting to be had with some magazines, some newspapers to expand its poetry section and things of that nature. So hopefully,
if you're listening, magazine people.
If you're listening, Tribune, sometimes.
You've also talked about wanting to develop younger Chicago poets. You've worked with young people for many years. We've got about 45 seconds left.
Yes.
How do you plan to use this role to reach Chicago's youth?
What I've been doing, going to schools, going to the after-school programs and to the many community organizations, and just working with youth and trying to figure out the ways in which they can get a platform to tell people they are here, they are alive, and their breath is valuable.
Okay, Avery Young, Chicago's first poet laureate. Congrats, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Of course. About 26,000 people leave Illinois prisons each year, and many of them report having trouble finding employment once they're home. This week, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle announced the expansion of the Road Home program, which connects returning residents with help finding jobs upon their release. As part of WTTW's ongoing initiative, Firsthand, Life After Prison, here's business owner and Road Home participant Gia Davis giving us the last word on why she says hiring returning citizens just makes good business sense.
Hi, I'm Gia Davis. I am the owner of Full Circle Transportation Services, Full Circle Real Estate Consulting, and where we are right now, Gigi Willikers Hoagies and Wings. I saw the need in the community for people who were coming home but were having a hard time finding jobs. People that I knew, experiences that I heard of, just seeing a need for opportunities for people who were coming home. I was introduced to the Road Home program in the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership, started working with them and working with their participants, and it's just been a great experience. We have several people who work across our companies who never did the jobs before, but they learned on the job and it worked out well. We need employees that are reliable, that are dependable, that come to work, that can do the jobs that we have, and returning residents need jobs. Everyone wants to be in a place where they feel safe. And so there's a greater likelihood of safety when everyone in the community is productive. Illinois has very high recidivism rates. So why are our rates so high? Well, one of the reasons is because people have a hard time finding employment. You know, you have to be able to survive on the outside. And that's what I liked about the Road Home program. It wasn't just starting when they came home, it literally started inside. I want you to consider not just the opportunity for others, but the opportunity for yourself. If you're in business and you have a need, there's a population that can meet the need. And so be open. If there's nothing that's hindering you from hiring someone who's a returning resident, except for your own belief of what the experience will be like, don't let that be the experience that denies you a great opportunity. When we get behind programs that allow people to return home and be productive in their return, the whole community wins.
Cook County leaders also designated April as Second Chance Month to call for awareness and opportunities for residents returning from incarceration. There's much more on WTTW's Firsthand Life After Prison initiative on our website. That's at WTTW.com/firsthand. The King of Calypso, Harry Belafonte, died this week at age 96. His rise to fame in the 1950s, introducing American audiences to Caribbean rhythms, caught the attention of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who encouraged Belafonte to join him in the fight for civil rights. In this clip from a 2001 Chicago Stories interview, Belafonte reflected on Dr. King's belief in the ability of song to lift and inspire the movement.
He had a great sense of respect and even some reverence for those who were touched by the gift of art. He also knew that within the context of the movement itself, that the most inspiring force to be evoked at any given moment, that always had the most positive results, was the song. And if the evening or an event was being organized, was central to everything else, not only who was the speaker, how do you best get to the people, what's the Dr. King had to know where will our music come from? Where will the voices be that will lead us in song? And my task was to, in part, was to use whatever relationships I had or influence on relationships that I had to win some of the best artists of our day to our cause.
Again, that was Harry Belafonte in a 2001 interview. He died this week at 96 years old. A note before we go. Starting Friday, May 5th, you'll be able to watch Chicago Tonight Black Voices here on WTTW and streaming live at 10 p.m. Now, that's in addition to our 6:30 p.m. broadcast on Saturdays. So mark your calendars and tune in at 10 p.m. Friday, May 5th. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And join me and Paris Schutz next week at 5:30 and 10 on Chicago Tonight. And we leave you tonight with some more music from Deontay Baker, one of the participants in the city's Resilient Communities Guaranteed Income Pilot. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Have a good night.
You've come so far from where you started, so don't be afraid to let your light shine on all of the world, bring it all the way down. You're a soul star on where you've come so far from where you started. So I'm telling you, don't be afraid.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.